Hi folks, today we'll be painting an outdoor wasteland base sculpted by Modifius for a miniature used in the Fallout Wasteland Warfare miniatures game. We'll be starting out by applying a base coat of dryad bark all over the base. This is just to give us a nice dark brown mud colour for the earth. Now you could use Rhinox hide from Games Workshop or charred brown from Vallejo. Basically any dark brown will work for this. And this wants to go all over the base. Now I've thinned this down with a little bit of water. It's wet on the brush to try and give us some even coverage, but I'm not too fussed about it being super thin and applying thick coats. This is just to get good coverage over the entire base. Okay, now that the base coat is dried, we're going to be dry brushing the first highlight. So for this I will be using Mornfang Brown from Games Workshop. Give that a good check. So the idea with dry brushing is you apply paint onto a brush and then you want to rub the excess off onto a piece of paper towel or kitchen towel until there is very little paint left on the bristles of the brush. I'm using a dry brush from Games Workshop for this because it ruins brushes. So the technique for dry brushing is to brush lightly back and forth over the miniature or base or whatever item you have, and it will pick out the raised details, leaving the darker paint that we've applied previously in the shadows. Now with dry brushing it's often desired that you want to build up the colour, so start doing circular motions or backwards and forwards very lightly. You can always add more to build up a colour, but it's very difficult to take it away without having to repaint the model. And do this until there's a state that you're happy with. Now this depends on how light brown you want the mud to go after this. Okay, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. When you're dry brushing, be careful not to press too hard, as it is possible to take off the previous layer of paint or your primer if the previous coat isn't 100% dry. Okay, next I'm going to start refining some of the colour of the mud a bit. This is English Uniform from Vallejo Model Colours line. This is a very similar colour to Steel Legion Grab from Games Workshop, and I'll be using it to apply some spots in the mud just to provide some tonal differences. So this is my very messy palette. Again, it's the same dry brushing method, getting a bit on the brush and then wiping away the excess. Then here we're just focusing on a couple of spots, just to add a bit of variance. You can apply as many or as little as you want for these. I recommend picking out 2 or maybe 3 spots and vary the sizes of them. And again, you can do 1 or 2 passes depending on how strong you want the colour to be. Move this part off to one side. Okay, the next colour we're going to be using is Dawnstone. Now this is a light grey colour from Games Workshop, and we'll be dry brushing this across the model to help blend in those earthy tones that we've already done. So again, getting a little bit on the brush, working into the paper towel, then here we'll be lightly brushing backwards and forwards across the model. This is just going to help merge the tones in together and make everything a bit more natural and less uniform. Less like handmade paint splodges and more like variations in the earth. Okay, back comes the palette. So next we'll be using a light grey from Vallejo's model colour line. This is a very similar colour to Administratum Grey from Games Workshop. What we'll be doing this is doing a very light pass of this light grey over the base, just to help make some of the plant vines and raised detail pop out a bit more. You can do this across the entire base, or you can use it to focus on specific areas. If you've got a bit of pavement or stone, these last two colours were a bit that you can put an extra bit of focus on to help a bit of pavement or rock stand out. Okay, just getting rid of the paint off the brush. Now we will be coming back in with English Uniform from Vallejo Model Colour. This is where we are now starting to add some post-apocalyptic colour tones to the model. Now here we're going to be going back over the same areas that we did initially with the English Uniform. Now you may decide you want to pick different areas, but this is just to break up that grey and to start adding some more apocalyptic rust tones. Now we're going to come in with some Troll Slayer Orange from Games Workshop. This is a nice bright orange, and we're going to start increasing the orangey tones within the previously made splotches. So again, this is we're focusing in the middle areas of the previous English Uniform. A very light coating of the dry brushing. This is starting to make some more orangey contrast against the grey-brown mud now. And here we are coming in with Avalon Sunset from Games Workshop. This is a nice yellow ochre base colour. I'm going to do a stippling motion with this. So it's very similar to dry brushing, but rather than going backwards and forth, you want to sort of stab the brush into the model. We want to get a very small amount of colour on this. And this is just in over the orange areas, just to add a final highlight to them. This is entirely optional, but I quite liked it. Now, depending on how vibrant you have gone with your splodges, we can do a final dry brush of each shabty bone across the entire base to blend all the colours in together. This is to take the edge off some of the orangey yellow tones and help them blend into the mud. The bone colour is a nice neutral tone between the browns and the oranges. And this will help pick out any vines or any other details in the earth that may have been lost in previous steps. And here the dry brushing steps of this tutorial are now complete. You can leave it here and attach a model and paint the edge of the rim of the base, but if you'd like to go further you could add some weathering powders. Here I'm going to be using Medium Earth from Forge World's Weathering Powder range. This is just a mid-tone brown pigment. There are various companies that make weathering powders. I just happen to have Forge World powders. So using a knackered old brush, just get some of the pigment on the end of the brush and tap the excess off back into the container, because this stuff will stain. With this, going to apply the pigment onto the base into areas that you want to add a bit more of a brown tone into it. This is almost like adding like chalk dust or a very dusty sort of oil pastel-y type thing. Just blowing off the excess. And this applies more of a stain to the model, but looks more natural than applying a wash to stain the model. Secondly, I'm going to refine this with some aged rust powder. This is a dark orange, which we're just going to add a couple of basically highlights to the previous step. This allows for some variation in tone. Just blow off the excess, or tap off the excess depending on where you are. Make sure the lids go back on. And here I'm going to use a Baden Black from Games Workshop. This is just the black that I had on hand. Any black will do from any paint range. And this is just to paint the rim of the base. So here I'm taking a lump of blue tack or poster putty and just fixing the base to the bottom of the painting handle so that I've got a nice access to the entire rim of the base. I'm going to give it 1 to 2 coats depending on whether you've primed this in grey or black primer. I've done this in grey, so I'm going to do 2 coats of this. And with the rim of the base painted, the base is now complete. I've attached the model here so that you can see how it fits in, but this should give you a nice idea on how to do some natural earth tones using dry brushing and pigments for your Fallout Wasteland Warfare miniatures. I will attach a couple of photos to the end of the video to show the base without the miniature up close.